We are back with the Poetic Turn. My name is Darren Stevens, and I'm with
Evan Carlson.
And we have a poem for you today. I wasn't familiar with this one. And Evan Carlson is our content manager. He is tasked with usually finding our poems and poetry and our poets, and he's been terrific at that, as I expect. If you're hearing the sound of my voice, I expect you agree. Evan, what brought you to this poem?
Well, I was introduced to Yeats really in the past couple years, or maybe even past year, I'd say. And you know, he's just a fascinating poet. I'd never read anything but by him previously, but he's obviously got some very, very big poems. The Second Coming, I think, is the biggest one he does.
You say biggest, most important, or longest?
Biggest.
Or?
It's the most well known. At least some people might say most important. But that one, you know, I thought everybody, everybody's going to be doing that one. You know, turning and turning. Which maybe we'll do it one day because it starts with two instances of the turn. But this one...
Oh, yeah, and you're listening, folks, you're listening to a podcast called The Poetic Turn.
Turn. But I figured we could save that for a day where we bring in somebody maybe to look
Take us through it.
Yeah, because it's such a big one. But this one, The Fisherman, when I started reading his poems, this one stood out to me. And for some reason, I do like poems about fish or fishermen, generally speaking. But I don't know, it stood out to me, and maybe we'll get into it a little more, but Yeats is a very, there's sort of this spirituality he has that's a little different. He
was immersed in spirituality. That was a big part of his life. Yeah,
and all these things, and you know, we can talk about this more, but one of his sort of ideas about poetry and rhythm in poems, he thought that it should put you into a trance. The rhythm of the words themselves should put you into a bit of some kind of trance between awake and sleeping and dreaming, and you know, so that was his sort of goal. And so I was just sort of fascinated by the guy himself, and you know, this poem stood out to me as one that I really enjoyed, because some of his poetry, you know, it's got references to various Irish mythology or real life people, and so you've got to go look up who that is to sort of understand what's going on. But this one just connected with me regardless of that.
Yeah, he's very Irish. If you look up and read about Yeats, he's very much about Ireland and being Irish, and not caving in or landing in England for some reason, or leaving his country. He's very, very much an Irish patriot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm no expert on his life, but I got enough to be interested by it, and this poem, The Fisherman, took me in a little. Would you like to read it first, Darren? Or would you like me to?
Why don't you read it first this time?
Sure thing. This is The Fisherman by William Butler Yeats. Although I can see him still, the freckled man who goes to a gray place on a hill, in gray Connemara clothes, at dawn to cast his flies, it's long since I began to call up to the eyes this wise and simple man. All day I'd looked in the face what I had hoped it would be, to write for my own race, and the reality, the living men that I hate, the dead man that I loved, the craven man in his seat, the insolent unreproved, and no knave brought to book who has won a drunken cheer, the witty man and his joke aimed at the commonest ear, the clever man who cries the catch cries of the clown, the beating down of the wise, and great art beaten down. Maybe a 12-month since, suddenly I began, in scorn of this audience, imagining a man, and his sun-freckled face, and gray Connemara cloth, climbing up to a place where stone is dark with froth, and the down-turn of his wrist when the flies drop in the stream. A man who does not exist, a man who is but a dream, and cried, "Before I am old, I shall have written him one poem, maybe as cold and passionate as the dawn."
Wonderful. Great job, great job. So many wonderful images, and there is a mystical spirituality aspect to this. And then we have the turn at the end. A man who does not exist, a man who is but a dream. Is it because it's in his mind? He's calling this forth, or what do you think that's about?
Well, it's one of those. It took me a while with this one to really connect to it. So we might need a couple readings today. But it's what I remember from when I was first going through this is that he was very frustrated by his audience and the kind of art that people wanted. And so there's sort of this imagining of art getting beaten down, but he imagines this audience maybe at the end, but the man does not exist. He's in a dream. But he wants to write a poem as cold and passionate as the dawn. That's sort of his goal for poetry, is that it's as cold and passionate as the dawn.
You have here the beating down of the wise and great art beaten down, and art is capitalized, art, capital A. And so, and I see there, maybe a 12 months since, suddenly I began in scorn of this audience, that audience that beats down art. Yeah,
and so there's sort of this imaginary audience that he makes, this fisherman on the edge of this place, this rock in gray cloth, and it's sort of a hardier person in a way, and he wants to write this person something real, but he doesn't exist. That's what it's very mystical. It's very it takes me into it, and it's like a mist is over everything. When I read it.
And but it's also great art conjures forth something like this. Great art has conjured forth an entire world and personage, and a man in Connemara cloth, and he's fly fishing, and he didn't exist before the dream created by Yeats, I guess you could say.
Yeah. No, it's and that's sort of what he's going for in his poetry, I suppose, is that dream, that place where we exist and we don't exist. And so that's sort of what the turn can do, is take us from where everything is expected and known and clear to us to a place that maybe it's not.
Very well said, Evan. Very well said. Yes, in the poems we've talked about on this podcast, The Poetic Turn, you think you know what's happening, and then there's a switch, or maybe you do know what's happening, but there's an insight. Very, very well put. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's strange too, because he, in scorn of this audience, he started imagining a man. He imagined this person, and maybe it's somebody that he wished he could be. Maybe it's who he wished everybody else could be. But I don't know. We've talked to some poets here, and they don't seem to scorn their audiences very much. They seem to actually appreciate people who who read their stuff. So it's
this poet Yeats or the writer of this poem is inspired by that audience.
Yeah.
Maybe 12 months since, suddenly I began. Doggone it. The audience, that audience was in such a place that I didn't care for, that by God, I'm going to imagine a man in his sun-freckled face and his gray Connemara cloth. I'm going to put that together to say to heck with you, audience, and what you think or what you want to do. And now in modern times, there are so many audiences we could celebrate or scorn.
Yeah. Well, and it sort of brings into question what is good art, and does the audience know what is
do
good?
Do they make it good? Do they bring it down? If they are appreciative, do we trust the audience to appreciate?
Yeah.
Who gets to decide? Maybe we get to decide when we look at the poem what we think of it.
Well, and that's where this poem has sort of lived with me in the world of theater a lot, because it's so audience based, and you can tell immediately what's going on. But I've been an audience member, I've been on stage, and sometimes you do look around and you think, everybody likes this.
That's true, and because it's so easy, and you and I are comedy people too, and we care about comedy. We generated comedy and made people laugh, and sometimes it does feel like, oh boy, does this audience they're really taking this in, or they're really amused by this? But we can't have disrespect for our audience either.
No,
we're glad, especially those of us in the theater and performance. We're glad they came out and saw us. We're glad they made the trip.
But I can empathize with that idea that, if I just had this perfect person out there, I could put on the greatest show ever, because they would match exactly what I needed, and so I think that there's that longing for things to match up as well, that people can appreciate the great stuff that we do that maybe not everybody does. Or everybody appreciates the terrible stuff we do, and we just want them to like the deeper ones.
Well, where does the Poetic Turn podcast land? We can't say, being integrally involved with it, Evan Carlson. We hope people are enjoying this art that we're making on the podcast app.
Oh yeah, well, and I think the Fisherman, that image too of somebody who's constantly searching for something, constantly
casting his flies,
and so the perfect audience for him is not just content to sit around. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Good thoughts, very good thoughts, Evan. I can see him still, the freckled man who goes to a gray place on a hill in gray Connemara clothes. At dawn, gets up early to cast his flies.
Would you like to give it another read for us?
Sure, I would. And informed by your thoughts and our conversation so far. Okay.
Yeah.
This is William Butler Yeats, The Fisherman. Although I can see him still, the freckled man who goes to a gray place on a hill in gray Connemara clothes at dawn to cast his flies, it's long since I began to call up to the eyes this wise and simple man. All day I'd looked in the face what I had hoped it would be, to write for my own race and the reality, the living men that I hate, the dead man that I loved, the craven man in his seat, the insolent unreproved, and no knave brought to book, who has won a drunken cheer, the witty man in his joke, aimed at the commonest ear, the clever man who cries the catch cries of the clown, the beating down of the wise, and great art beaten down. Maybe a 12-month since, suddenly I began, in scorn of this audience, imagining a man, and his sun-freckled face and gray Connemara cloth, climbing up to a place where stone is dark with froth, and the downturn of his wrist when the flies drop in the stream. A man who does not exist, a man who is but a dream, and cried, "Before I am old, I shall have written him one poem may be as cold and passionate as the dawn.
Very nice.
It's so interesting, Evan. You've brought me so much connection to poetry in our time working together, and I did not get nearly as much from this poem on my first 2 or 3 readings as I did after your reading of it, your thoughts about it, and then my reading one more time. And it just goes to show, and I hope that perhaps those people listening to our podcast, listening to The Poetic Turn, might give a poem that they don't get right away more opportunities, more readings, more times to go through it. There's a connection made.
And this poem isn't a question, as we say. It's not a question that demands a correct answer.
Right.
What came up for you in this reading?
I think I connected with the first half and the second half. The fact that he saw this man, and just what you said about the connection to an audience that maybe doesn't. The clever man who cries, the catch cries of the clown. The witty man in his joke aimed at the commonest ear. The easy humor, the easy things that. And so that connection to the one kind of quote art and another kind of art that is not in quotes, that's maybe real art, or if you can call it that.
Well, and it just, I keep on getting drawn back to this last line, and I think about this a lot in general with poetry. Is a poem may be as cold and passionate as the dawn. One poem may be as cold and passionate as the dawn, and that sometimes when I'm reading poetry, I think maybe that's what I'm looking for, is something like that, that is just stark and there, and the dawn is a moment of turning as well. And it's passionately turning. He wants something that is passionate but cold, that is like the dawn. All these things are.
Well, there's nature in there, and and passionate, and think about dawn and dawn colors, rosy-fingered dawn. Early, that's Homeric. It's a Homeric construction.
Yeah. Well, and for me, a poem that is cold and passionate as the dawn, it makes me, the thing that comes to mind, we read with Austin Smith, is that poem, The Brinkmeyers. Which, a poem like that just is, it's striking, and it is a bit cold in some ways, but it's also passionate, and it feels like something is dawning into something new. I don't know.
Another aspect of this, we have to keep in mind, he is inspired, maybe a 12 months since suddenly again in scorn of this audience, imagining a man, he's inspired to create this poem with nature, with description, and it's written for someone who doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's created for someone who does not exist.
Yeah. And does that then make the poem
more art?
land?
Is it more artistic then? Is it more art then? Or?
But those funny people that he talks about, the clown and the witty man with his joke aimed at the commonest ear.
Yeah.
It has a real ear, There's a real person at the other end.
That's right. That audience he's looking down is real versus the poem he's writing for an imaginary man.
Well, because you can't control what an audience thinks. You can't have any control. So I don't know. It's a bit of a strange poem. It's a bit of a creepy poem too for me.
Yeah. Well, the mysticism in it, the ghostliness of it, and you talked about the mist, and there's
and that's how I take it. There's probably hundreds of different things in this. So maybe there could be some political things I'm not getting from way back when, but
From February of 1916, when it was
Yeah.
in Poetry Magazine. Yeah.
But, that just proves that there's always more to dig into,
Yeah. This one doesn't have, there are some poems that are very much of their time and have certain aspects of the exact time they're from, and you really have to do some research about,
Yeah.
what was happening in the world at that time, or there are certain things happening around us now in 2026 that will be gone forever, never to be remembered.
Yeah. Yeah.
certain songs, certain videos, certain poems, who knows, that'll vanish without a trace, and yet there are some things that will live on. Shakespeare.
Yeah. And this does have a bit of a timelessness to it. I
It
mean,
does.
from the title,
It's evergreen.
The
Yeah.
Fisherman, I mean, it's sort of this archetypal figure that always exists. Even the Connemara clothes, I don't really know what that's about, but I can feel it. I can understand it. And I'm sure if, I did my due diligence and looked into it, it would be edifying in some way. But, you don't have to always.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. We don't research what was happening in Ireland in 1916 to be able to read, enjoy, and understand.
Well, because it's nice to have some mystery.
Yeah,
It's not a mathematical equation that we need to solve for every single unknown number.
Yes.
We can let it be a little misty in some places.
Exactly. That's a very, very good thought, and a thing for our listeners to keep in mind. Maybe there's a poem you connect with, but maybe not every line or every word, or there's some things that don't grab you, but there are other aspects of that particular poem you're going through that really do speak to you.
Yeah, yeah.
So interesting, because and again, with your interpretation and your reading of it and discussion of it, the poet is imagining the flies that drop in the stream to fish, where the stone is dark with froth and the downturn of his wrist. I mean, the detail of this fisherman just allowing his lure to drop into the water, and the detail of that, and it's so detailed, it's so specific, and of course it's vapor.
Yeah. And he cried out just to the nothingness, "Before I am old, I shall have written him one." And I mean, that image itself,
Yeah.
I think it's, to understand Yeats, I don't understand Yeats fully at all, but I feel like there's something to this poem as maybe a key into it. So if we do revisit it, I'm sure that phrase will come into any poem that we do read by him.
I'm sure you're right. You're very likely correct there. Yeah, that there's a dreamlike, mystical, occult aspect of.
Now, did you feel yourself entering into that state from the rhythm of the the words in between asleep and waking to enter into that? Was it a magical experience?
Well, it took me the last time through to get it and to take it in.
Yeah.
Much more connecting to the occult, strange, misty, difficult aspect of it in this. After having looked at it and looked at it again and looked at it again, and with the Evan Carlson discursive discussion. Yeah.
Well, I got a lot more out of it too, just reading it now, because I had, when you revisit a poem, it some certain connections that you've made either don't come back to you or do come back to you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I really connected to this much more than I thought I would, Evan, and let's give it a shot here, and I wanted to do a poem by, we just you brought this to the podcast. You said, hey, how about this one? And sure, Evan. There's nature. There's There's this glorious poet from the beginning of the 20th century. Sure, let's celebrate this, but I got much more out of it. I hope our listeners took something from this unusual poem, and then hopefully they'll take even more when they go to our show notes and read the poem, read the words themselves, and take in the words themselves. I hope whoever's listening to this will keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely read it yourself, because as I've probably said before, Mark Yakic, he says the single greatest way to disrupt the soul is to read a poem out loud, and this is a good poem to disrupt the soul, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for bringing it to us, Evan Carlson.
Well, thanks for being here with me.
And thank all of you who are listening. If you like what we're doing here, please like, share, give us a review. That all matters in this crazy podcast world. And we will see you next time on The Poetic Turn.